Hey, and welcome to today's Infinity Training. It is Tuesday. It is hot. It is the 26th of May. And guess what? We have usually you see Santa Claus and his wife, Mrs. Claus, in December, but now we have Mrs. Claus who is going to give you a bunch of training on how to do your real estate clauses. See the pun there? And so it's Shannon Haskins. Shannon Haskins has been with Hometown for, I guess this is round two.
Yeah.
She left and realized that was a stupid move.
It was only for 15 months though. So I've been here for over 15 years now.
There you go. But she left and came back because she realized that there's no place like home. So anyway, Shannon is managing our Chesterfield office, and she is going to talk a little bit about clauses. So what do we need to know about clauses? You can get yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't, if you're not able to articulate what you're really trying to say in your contracts.
Right.
The contract is great because most of it is fill in the blank, but in today's world especially, there are circumstances that come up where we need to write certain things in to ensure that our clients get what they want. And so Shannon, let's take it away.
All right. So I just emailed you all some a document that I want you to be able to print out and keep. There's some of the guys that know how to print and insert different phrases into Transaction Desk. I'm not that tech savvy. I'm going to print and write it or keep them around because that works nice for me. And I wanted to kind of go over some things that we want to do and then also some things that we don't want to do. And the biggest thing that I recently went through all the broker classes, and there's like days and days of legal stuff on that. And the biggest thing that they kept stressing was, we want you to write it in such a way that if someone who didn't know all the backstory and all the conversations between you and the other agent and didn't know the texts and what your intent was, if they only saw the document that you created, whether it's the contract or whether it's an addendum, if they just saw that, would they know what the buyer was required to do and then also what the seller was required to do? So I have people, turn in contracts and it says things like, fix the siding. Like, what siding? All of it? Do I have to replace the whole house? I mean, what exactly am I required to do? And then I have contracts that scare me that come in where the buyer's agent has waived thing that you can waive to win the contract. That's great. We want you to win the contracts. We also would like you to maybe just build in just a little loophole to get your customer out if things really go sideways. And they don't always, but they could. And so we just wanted to give you a couple of examples, and then always remember when you're writing it, ask if and then. So if your seller doesn't replace the siding, then my buyer would get their earnest money deposit back. So if you can answer that with whatever you're trying to write, if you have an if and then you know what's going to happen if it doesn't work out, or if you get somebody who gets a little fussy. So you want to try to answer those questions with what you're writing. And so I emailed you that, but Deane also has this up on the screen. So things that you want to be able to put in your contract to help you win. I put a couple of those in there. All parties agree that the buyer will not request any repairs identified during the home inspection with a cost to cure estimate of over $500 or less, but retains all other rights. And you can either put see section 16, page 4 or 5, or you can put in there, per the inspection part. So that 500, that is up to you to negotiate with your customer. It might be $1,000. It might be $2,500. It might be $5,000. I don't know. It depends on the house. It depends on the customer. But I just put that in there because you can change out those numbers to suit you if all of the other things are there. All parties agree the buyer is waiving the right to request any repairs that can terminate the contract with the earnest money refunded if a single repair with a cost estimate exceeding $1,000 is identified in the property inspection. So how many times have you said that you're going to waive the inspection, but you didn't say, what if something major came up? Like, what if it really does come up? Like, what if it's thousands of dollars in the crawl space and you couldn't have possibly seen it? You don't want to feel bad. You also don't want to be liable, and you don't want your customer to be mad at you. So again, that $1,000 is just a guideline. It could be more, it could be less, depends on the house, depends on the area and the range. And most importantly, it depends on your customer's tolerance. If they've got thousands of dollars in the bank, then $1,000 probably won't kill them. If they're scraping nickels together to get to closing, then you might need to be on the lower side. If you are doing something like, you could also attach the as is addendum and then scratch through paragraph 2 on the as is addendum. If you haven't looked through that, the as is addendum spells out that you have the right to the home inspection and that you could terminate the contract. That's all in page 1, or paragraph 1, excuse me. That's really great. Paragraph 2 states that the seller is not going to do a termite or a well or a septic. So a lot of times I personally will attach the as is, because it makes my seller sound like it makes my buyer sound like we're doing an as is contract. We're not going to ask you for anything. And then I just scratch through paragraph 2. So then that way they still have to do the septic, well, and termite that the lender might need, and that also my buyer just might need to have done. So that's one option too, to make your offer sound strong, because it looks like it's as is, but when you look at it, really, they're just not asking for repairs, but they still have to do the termite, well, and septic. Then we've got so many people. How many people have had appraisal gap, things that are going on right now, and people that are waiving appraisals, right? Or waiving parts of it. So keep in mind, you can't really waive the appraisal when they're getting a loan on a property. You can adjust, to fill in the gap. So if you're listing a property, the list price is 300 and you're offering 310, and maybe your person has $5,000, you could say that they could pay $5,000, but you need to write on there not to exceed the contract price. We've had people write on there, buyer to pay $5,000 more than the appraised price. Okay, well, what if it appraises at 350? Now we got to buy a house at 350 and we got to pay cash for any difference. You want to make sure that you add in there not to exceed the contract price. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. All parties agree if the house does not appraise for the contract price, the buyer will pay $5,000 above the appraised value. So, either way you want to write it, whether you want to call it a gap or shortage, you want to make sure that you put in there not to exceed the contract price. And you need to be verifying if your customer actually has the money. They've got their 5% down, and then they've got their closing costs, because we're not getting any closing costs hardly paid on many deals. Then do they also have that 5,000? So some listing agents will actually ask you to prove it, meaning, do you have bank statements? Some lenders will ask you to prove it, but you also need to be proving it. You're writing the contract. Do you know what they have? Have you asked the lender? Have you asked the customer? Have you done the math, loosely in your head? General contract phrases that I have people have: all parties agree that the buyer will offer the seller a 7-day rent back for free. That's a great one. It helps smooth everything over. The seller gets their money and gets a chance to move and buy, and it puts your buyer in a premium position with really a minimal out-of-pocket cost. But you need to attach the rent back. See the attached possession after closing agreement, and get that done at the time of contract. If you get it done later, and now your buyer and your seller have gotten a little adversarial during the home inspection, or the appraisal came in short, and now the seller doesn't want to do a deposit. So even if it's free, I'm getting a deposit held by the closing agent or the title company on the seller's behalf to make sure that they do all the things and turn the house over in good condition. Not
And can I add something on that? I think
yes, please.
We missed a change there. So the better phrase there will be, it depends on which side you want, but I think it might be better to say that all parties agree that the seller shall have the option to rent the home back from the purchaser, up to 7 days after settlement.
Yeah. And that again is usually, I've called the agent and I've asked them if that's something that would interest the seller. If the house is vacant, they don't need it. It's not going to do them any good.
That's
If
right.
they have 2 kids and 2 dogs, then they need it. But again, there you want that deposit held, even if you're giving them the option for the free 7 days, because you want to make sure that they're, cutting the grass one last time and broom swept clean out. And then when it comes to like ring systems and nest systems, you need to make sure that's addressed in the contract. Even though we are really big about the bill of sale for personal property, the nest system operates the heating and air. I got to really couldn't turn it on or off. And not all of them are like that. Some of them have like this other backup unit that goes with it if the nest isn't working. But I would address any ring or nest items in the contract because they are. So address those differently than you would say the refrigerator or the washer or dryer appliances.
One other thing to add there, if you are the listing agent or your buyer's agent and the house has a alarm system, you can see evidence that there's some kind of alarm system. When you list the property, you want to be asking the seller, are you under some kind of an agreement? Are you month to month? Are you under an annual contract? And if so, how are we going to handle this when the house sells? Are we going to pay it out so that the buyer would have that as an incentive to the buyer? Are we going to make sure that the buyer is responsible for this? Or are we just on a month to month and we're just going to let it terminate? And then you probably want to document that in the listing, in MLS and in any contract that you get, just so it's clear. And then if you're the buyer's agent, you want to make sure that your buyer's not getting, slapped with a 7-month, $49 a month burglar alarm deal if they don't want that. So you might want to articulate that the house does have, all parties acknowledge the house does have an alarm. There is no contract and purchaser shall not be responsible for maintaining any contract with ADT or whoever it might be.
Right. So again, it goes back to if someone who was completely separate from it just read your contract or just read your addendum, would it be completely clear who has to do what? That's the biggest thing, is you can't just make blanket statements. The buyer's going to waive the appraisal. You've got to be more specific, like what all is entailed to it. And then I listed some do's and don'ts because I feel like sometimes the best way to learn is by an example of what not to do. And you guys can read over this, but like one of the ones I saw recently, all parties agree that the seller will remove the junk behind the shed. Well, what if they don't consider it junk? What if it's firewood that they're going to use or would have used, and your customer looks at it as like a place for a bug and a snake to live? You've got to be specific on what you want taken out of there. Buyer requests the seller to have a licensed contractor repair the siding. Which siding? What part of it? Like get some specifics on there. And Deane has gone over like some of the language to make sure we're addressing that. Oops, I'm moving stuff around on Deane's thing. And don't do things like seller to have the deck repaired. I've seen a lot of those lately. It's summertime. We're thinking about the decks more and more. But seller to have a licensed contractor make the following repairs to the rear deck and then do A, B, C. By the same token, I've seen people where they list out, 12 different lines with an electrician instead of like have a licensed electrician repair A, B, C, D, E. It just makes it a lot easier when you're trying to pull that report together to kind of keep them, in the same place. It makes it easier for the other side. And I can't stress this enough. When you are doing a inspection, your job is to package it so that the other agent can sell it to the seller. So I'm going to call them and I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to ask for 1 through 5. And then, 6 and 7, your seller could do for us. And then 8 through 14, we're not going to ask for anything, so that they know we're not asking for all of it. So I want to make sure that you understand. And hey, FYI, my person had an electrical fire, and that's why we're asking for all of the electrical to be done with a licensed electrician versus just a regular contractor. Then they can go back to their seller when they're trying to get your items done for you, and they have some context to be able to share. And so when you're doing these addendums, yes, you want to have those outside contracts, but it's always selling. I'm selling the customer on the contract. I'm selling the listing agent on taking my contract. I'm selling my buyer and the listing agent on why my inspection is that way. I'm selling them all the way down the line. So it's not ever done until the keys are turned over and it records. All appliances convey. Which ones? I had a person take out a refrigerator and put a crappy, yucky refrigerator in the kitchen when we put refrigerator kitchen to convey. So then we had like a big issue and we had to make them bring it back. So now I've gotten to the point where I put the refrigerator, washer, and dryer stove, which are currently in the home, to convey, so that it's clear exactly which ones I'm asking them to do. A lot of these big homes, they have a refrigerator in the kitchen. They have a refrigerator in the garage. They might have a refrigerator in the mini bar on the 3rd floor. So try to be specific on which one and for what. And the ultimate test of the verbiage is if the person who didn't know your intent read it, just read it, would they know who had to do what? Do they know what the seller has to do to perform? Do they know what the buyer has to do? And do they know what happens if it doesn't get done? Does your buyer get their deposit back? Are they just allowed to walk away and they lose their money? What is the ramifications of that? So that's the biggest thing. I know that these are simple, but they're things that Deane and I and Rodney get asked all the time of how do we express that? How do we explain this? And hopefully by asking some of the questions, the if and then, and the, don't do this kind of thing, I'm hoping that you guys will have a clearer idea of how to go forward and some verbiage on how to make your offer strong, but also protect your buyer or your seller. And then by the same token, when you start listing tons of properties, do you know which things to avoid like that? If I sent Deane a contract and it had all of those little things in it, Deane's going to read it over really carefully because he knows I know what I'm doing. And it'll make me stand out a little bit. He knows that I'm not going to let my buyer go rogue because we've already discussed those options, right? Those.
Very good.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Can you share with us, Shannon? I know you've shared it with me before, the clause that you put in or the part you put in about the septic inspection and everything that you asked them to do with that.
Yeah, so on the septic inspection on the contract at the top of that page, it asks for a couple different things. And I do the one where it says visual inspection inside the distribution box. And then there's a couple, like if you get a SVAR contract or one of the ones from the beach or Williamsburg, sometimes they won't have that additional language, excuse me. So I actually put in there where it says other, I'll check other because I usually have that. Visual inspection and excavation of the distribution box lid and the box itself. So if it doesn't have that in the contract of whatever you're sending over, prod probing, or the rod probing is not a very good test of a septic. You need to do more than that. And a lot of young agents, they don't want to check any more than that because they don't want to know. Don't tell me, let's just close it. Let's get to it. For me, I'm going to sell that person every house they're ever going to buy. And so I need to know if that septic's going to be good for a few years. And then also we have land deals where you're doing your 30-day or your feasibility study. You need to specify in there if your buyer can only pay for a conventional septic. If you just put in there that the septic, it just has to be able to perk, then if they have to spend $28,000 on an alternative engineered system, you personally rope them into doing it. You didn't take the time to write in conventional septic to kind of limit their costs. Does that make sense? So you want to make sure that you're taking the time to think about those things that could put them on the hook for more.
Thank you.
Good suggestion. Here's something that I see all the time is this language. And so what's wrong with this? Buyer requests the seller to have licensed contractor repair the bedroom window on the left side of the house. What's wrong with that?
Well, you're being super polite and requesting it, but it's not contractually obligating. I'm asking you, but you didn't say that you would do it. You didn't.
Yeah,
you
buyer
didn't.
requests doesn't that you go to court, maybe the judge says, okay, the intent there was that this was going to be done. I'd rather not have to go to court to have an interpretation of that and risk what the interpretation might be.
Yeah.
So what is better language, somebody other than Shannon?
Specifically seller to repair.
Exactly.
Yeah, seller to hire, licensed contractor and so on and so forth. All parties agree that the seller shall hire a licensed contractor to complete the work or whatever, something like that. So, yeah, so, pretty please is nice, but that's not what we need to do. We need to know that the action, it needs to be specific on who is to take the action, who's to pay for it.
Yeah.
All right. We're in a tremendous seller's market now where we're trying to do everything we can, and buyers are trying to do everything they can to outshine the competition with their offers and secure the property. Shannon alluded to this earlier. And so there are going to be concessions that will be made now that, would be unheard of in a traditional market. We just have to make sure that our people know what they're getting into. There may be times when they just want to simply waive the inspection.
Right.
And that's okay, but there are potential pitfalls with that, and we need to make sure that they know what those are, that, you're basically really buying it as is. And if things go bad and you got to spend a lot of money, then that's on you.
Yeah.
You got the house, but maybe it's going to be the money pit.
Yeah.
And then, like Shannon said with the appraisal, if you're getting a loan, you really can't waive the appraisal. That means we're just not having an appraisal.
Right.
Thanks, Bank of America. We're just not going to have an appraisal. And they're going to say, no, we are going to have an appraisal. What the whole idea here is, let's say you want to put 20% down to avoid mortgage insurance. So if the appraised value is, let's say, is $20,000 less than the contract price, then that 20%, you're going to have to bring an additional $20,000 more than you thought you were to get to putting 20% down. Does everybody understand that? So that's what we're talking about with making up the appraisal differences. And so, that you need to make sure if you're the listing agent, you need to ask when somebody agrees to make it up. You need to ask for documentation. No hard feeling. We're asking for documentation to see if they're approved for the loan, which is invading their privacy a little bit to make sure that they can put their money where their mouth is. But here we also need to make sure that it's not a pipe dream to make up the appraisal differential. So
right.
it's perfectly fine to ask for that documentation. And
By
if
the
you're a
same
buyer agent,
token,
you want to present it up front so that the listing agent and the seller know that your client is serious.
you can actually ask your lender, your loan officer that you work with, to write that in your pre-qualification letter. Like, they are willing to do that if you ask them. It's not part of their standard verbiage, but if you're in a competitive situation and they have looked at all the documentation to know what cash the customer has access to, and the customer's in a situation where they might make up a $10,000 appraisal shortage, they can put that in there. We have verified sufficient funds to, for up to $10,000. So you need to be ahead of the game. Don't wait until Saturday afternoon to ask your loan officer to add verbiage like that in. If you know that you're going shopping this weekend, you know that you've had that conversation with your buyer, then go ahead and ask your loan officer that on Thursday or Friday so they can get that to you and they can make sure that money's there.
Hey, Deane.
Hey, Trip.
I think I heard you wrong. So I'm asking this question. Did you say that if the appraised value comes in, I think you said, use the example of 20,000 higher or lower?
Lower.
Lower.
If it comes in $20,000 lower, all right. So say that.
Let me explain that again.
Yes, please.
So let's just use the example of let's just make it simple with the math. So $100,000. Your people want to buy a house that's $100,000, and they have $20,000 in their pocket to put down so that they won't have to pay mortgage insurance. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so at the, if everything works out nicely, the house is 100, they're going to put 20,000 down and then pay whatever closing costs on top of that, and then everybody lives happily ever after. There's no mortgage insurance. Well, let's say then the appraiser comes and the appraised value is only 80,000. Okay. All right, and you're needing to borrow enough money so that in order to beat the system and not pay the mortgage insurance, you're going to have to make up $20,000. You have to make up that $20,000 shortfall, or the buyer's going to have to renegotiate the deal and take the sales price down to 80, and then they'd actually have to put down less money. But if the contract price stays at 100,000 and the value is only 80,000, the bank is going to say, you got to come to the table with an additional $20,000 in order to make this work.
Right. So Trip, in that example, if it was $100,000 and then the appraisal came in short at 80,000, their 20% down on 80,000 is 16, right?
Right.
But then they're still going to have to come up with another 20,000 for the gap. So now they're at 36,000, plus they've got to pay their own closing costs, which might run them to 42. So if they had 42,000, I'm guessing they probably wouldn't have bought $100,000 property. But the principle is that you're still trying to hit those numbers. And the conversation I always have is, look, let's only put 10% down on that 80,000. That's going to be $8,000. Then pay our 20. Now we're at 28, and then we add our closing cost and we're at 35. And so we've saved ourselves some. Yeah, you have a little bit of mortgage insurance, but it's staggered down. So in that situation, you got a house in a market where people are only getting one out of every 4 or 5. So you've got to find your customer's tolerance for that. We had one recently where the house was listed at 259. We went in 285. Somebody else offered 310 on a 3-bedroom house in Chester. And I called the other agent and I said, look, they've lost control of their customer. They've gone rogue at this point. I said, why don't we do this? We'll guarantee 8,000 above appraisal. It's not even going to appraise for 285, but we'll go 290 because I know it's not going to appraise, and we'll give you a 30-day rent back, and we're going to do 8,000 above. And she gave us the contract, even though the other person had offered 310, because I could sell her on my numbers and that I had control over my buyer. In the end, it only appraised for 265. So we went 265 plus 8. We were all in at 273. When that other person was offering 310 and it was never going to close. So, definitely be able to go over your numbers, not only with your buyer, but with the listing agent, and be able to help them.
Gotcha. Yep.
Did I get it, Trip? Is that?
Yeah. I guess that's assuming that, okay, so the contract says that, but you got the appraisal paragraph, unless you've waived that, right?
Right. And we have people trying to waive it, and you can't really waive it if they've got a loan.
Right.
So the best you can do is guarantee a gap. So essentially you're saying, I'll pay $5,000 more than it appraises.
Right. So in this case, the buyer would have the option to say, okay, per the contract, we owe 85,000 at closing, right?
Right.
Well, and maybe the pay is a little bit different, because we're not really talking about sales price. You're talking about, another way you could write it is agreeing to cooperate with the lender requirements regarding cash down payment. Mm-hmm. That's what happens. So the contract says what it says, but if it's contingent on a loan, then there will be an appraisal. The house has to appraise at or above the sales price, or the following things can happen.
Yeah.
The deal can fall apart. The deal can be renegotiated, or the buyer can come and bring additional cash to the table to make up for the difference.
Yep. So we don't need to keep going on this, but I don't understand why they would need to bring 20,000 to make up the difference between 80 and 100 unless the seller just
because
said.
The bank is trying to secure their investment. Okay, if you're the bank of Trip, right?
Right.
And you think, and you're loaning money on a house and you think it's worth, and the buyer's paying $100,000, right?
Mhm.
And they're whatever, it doesn't really matter what they're borrowing, but if you're thinking the loan is secured by the property, if you don't pay, they get to keep the house. Everybody
get all that,
on board
yep.
with that. So if the house is really not worth 100,000, okay, then we get what happened in 2009 and 10, right?
Right.
Then here comes the bank. When the bank of Trip shows up, the house is worth less, okay, and then the bank is screwed. The reason the big buildings downtown have banks' names on it, because they're not real good at getting screwed, and they learned a big lesson back in the day. And that's why appraisals are much more stringent than it used to be. Some guy smoking weed, taking a picture, driving down the road of the house and just rubber stamping it. Now it's real, right? It's a real situation. That's one of the reasons why the market, this market is built on a totally different foundation than we had in 2005, 6, 7, and the beginning of whatever, 8. So.
Yeah. So Beth Ann just asked an important question. She said, how did I know that the other offer was 310? And the reason I know is because I'm really good at selling. And so it was a Friday night. I was negotiating that deal, and the other agent's name is Lindsay. And I said, Lindsay, how far are we off? And she's like, it's a lot, Shannon, because we offer 285. Keep in mind, the house was listed at 259. So we went in 36,000 higher, 30-day rent back for free, waived the inspection, and we're guaranteeing $8,000 appraisal gap. And you're telling me that I lost? How does that happen? And I said, how much was it by? She's like a lot, Shannon. I was like, over 3? She goes, yeah. I said, over 305? She goes, yeah. I said, over 310? She said, yeah, that's it. And I said, okay. I said, that's fair. I said, but here's the thing, Lindsay, that customer, that buyer's agent has lost control of their customer at this point. The fact that they would write an offer that was $51,000 over on a 3-bedroom in Chester, you and I both know it's not going to appraise for that. And so I just talked her into it. I just explained it. I was like, she's like, well, I'm here with my friends tonight. I said, you want me to put in an Authentisign for you? You text me your customers' email addresses and I'll put in an Authentisign for you right now. She's like, you would do that? I said, yeah, I'll do that. Because you know that other deal is not going to close. You know it. She's like, yeah. I said, well, here's what we'll do. We'll go 290 and 8 and do all the other things. 8,000 above anybody else. They can't go 8,000 above. We'll go 8,000 above. And she was like, okay, let me call him. So then she calls him back. She's like, all right, I'm gonna put in an Authentisign. I said, okay, you sure you don't want me to do it? I can do it for you. No, I got it. I was like, all right, well, you have your drinks. I'll take care of it. I'll text you when it's done. Right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to sell them on this. I'm going to be the easy one. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to ride this client like Seabiscuit to the table. I'm going to promise you that it's going to get done. That's my job. Yeah.
Hey, look, I was ready to Seabiscuit everything too, okay? But
yeah.
My clients had a fantastic offer that was reasonable. Yeah. And, you know, yeah. I tried to get the, it was the FSBO. I was trying to get the guy. I told you about that. He's not responded to me at all so that I could
do anything,
could negotiate anything. Yeah. So
sometimes you have to say something really extraordinary, especially in a for sale by owner situation where they don't have any response is, you know, what is it that would make our offer the best? In every email I send with every buyer's agent, I always put, and we're doing this, and we're doing that, and we're doing that. What can, and all caps above my signature, what can we do to be your offer of choice? Tell me, I'm open. You need me to come mow your grass? I mean, you need to do mulch before the appraisal? No. What do we got to do? I mean, mulch is only a couple $100 in a market where we're talking about thousands. And so, you know, A, make sure you're putting these things in your contract. B, make sure that your customer is on board with it. And then C, sell it. Call them, text them, say, hey, if you haven't signed anything, what do we have to do to be your offer of choice? What can I do to make this work for you? You have nothing to lose. All you're trying to do is get him to respond, but you can't negotiate with somebody who's not replying at all.
Any other questions?
On page one, I didn't pull up the document right away and follow you on page one. On page one, where you had the phrases or in between a couple of
Yeah.
phrases. So
Yes.
either one of those are good, just depending on the scenario.
Yeah, and obviously the appraisal gap is going to be different. I mean, if you're on a $700,000 house, you might have to guarantee 10,
Right.
20, 30. If you're on a $105,000 house, it may only be 5,000. It just depends on your client's tolerance, you know, and then also, you know, what the price in the house is.
Yeah, and they may trip if they have unlimited resources or something, and they don't really care what the shortfall is. They want the house, then you don't even need to put a number. You can just say they're going to make up any, but make sure they understand what that means. That could be significant.
Yeah.
But some people don't care. You know, they just want the house. So.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of people's frustration is coming in with the sight unseen offers that we're seeing right now. You know, the listing's going to go live tomorrow, and then all of a sudden it's under contract today. How did that happen? I didn't even get a chance to show it. It's because it's happening a lot. They know the area, they know the school system, and the bottom line is almost everything in a house is fixable. Beth Ann and I had this conversation the other day. Everything is fixable. It's just a matter of how much is it going to cost you. If you had the location, the square footage, and all the other things, then a lot of those smaller things can go. So when you get mad at other agents, just keep in mind, they are submitting the offers like they're supposed to, like they're required to, not because they want to. So I was a listing agent this week. I was put in a situation that we didn't want to be in. We didn't want to go early. We didn't want to show. We wanted to have everybody come in Friday, Saturday, Sunday, compete, drive it up. And these people sent us an offer, and it expired at 9, and it was sight unseen. And I had to present it because I'm required to. And you know, they hemmed and hawed until about 8:58 and then accepted it. So then I got a bunch of texts the next day, and you've got to do the right thing, answer them, say, I'm really sorry. We were in a situation we didn't want to be. This was not our plan. And just explain it nicely and then let it go.
One thing, another last thing to add would be careful when you get contracts from other associations. They're not written exactly like our contract, and so there are things in there, you know, just depending on whether it's a RAIN contract or whether it's a Virginia Association of Realtors contract or something from somebody members of Bright. But we're seeing more and more people from out of the Richmond area MLS come in and show and sell homes. So just because the price is this and you just glance over the sort of the Cliffs Notes, you need to read. If it's not our association, you need to make sure you look at every single page of that 1,000,000-page document, because there could be some stuff in there that would be shocking and would be unexpected for the client. So,
Deane, would you say that people have a right to request a CVR MLS contract? Like if you're putting a house on the market in Western Goochland, where it's very likely that a Charlottesville agent might show it, could you attach a CVR MLS contract and request it? Maybe not enforce it, but request it.
I think, yeah, I mean, and I would explain to the seller and get the seller's permission for that, and just say, hey, look, I'm an expert in our association, our association's documents. I'm not an attorney, and we deal with these, in our company, we deal with these thousands of times a year. These other things, we don't know. They could be changed. The last time we dealt with it, it could have been changed. We're not members of that association, so they don't update us when things change. So we're going to attach this and request it to be on this document, and I'll be glad to help the other agent understand our contract. I think that makes good sense.
Yep.
But if you do get one and on another association, you need to make sure you read every damn word of it, because they're different.
Yeah. By the same token, I know we normally take new construction contracts for granted. We kind of flip through them with the agent. Right now, specifically, you need to be looking for anything that says that they have the unilateral right to raise the price because of wood and supplies and stuff. Some contracts don't state that and some do. So, and you really can't change it. You're not going to negotiate the builder out of that, but you need to at least be able to inform your customer, hey, just so you know, they could come down to the end here and it could go up some. So we need to be prepared for that. And I think just having that chat up front before they sign in that context would at least be on the lookout for a little bit later.
Yeah, that's good.
Question in regards to that, would you recommend the builder actually going straight to an attorney and doing his own version of this? Or is this something that we should kind of throw into our responsibility as well?
So all of the builders, most of the builders have attorneys that have drawn up contracts. If they're a smaller builder and they're already to permit stage, they probably know, what the cost of it is going to be. If they are literally looking at land and haven't built, haven't permitted, nothing, I would think that you need to somehow address that one way or the other, whether it's through an attorney or knowing that your customer has the ability to go up 15 or 20,000 if needed, and have at least some sort of discussion and outline of how that should take place especially with a smaller builder. I mean, a smaller builder, if they go under on one house or they're in the red on one house, that could make it so they can't build the next one. So you got to be really careful. If you represent a smaller builder, then you've got to figure that out. If you represent the buyer in that scenario, how far along is the house? I would at least have that conversation with my customer that something could happen, something could take place to raise the supply price.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anything else?
All right. Thank you, Shannon.
Absolutely.
Here and ever known as Mrs. Claus. And if you do have questions, I'm sure Shannon would love to talk to you online as well as myself. So thanks. Have a great day. Appreciate all you do. And we'll see you soon.
Next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.